Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and it is March 24th. Today we celebrate a remarkable English naturalist and artist, and we'll also learn about the man known as the Rocky Mountain botanist. We'll hear a journal entry about Bloodroot, one of my favorite plants, and we grow that garden library today with a book about place and how location is just as important to gardens as it is to real estate. And then we'll wrap things up with a story of a landscape gardener who broke away from the style that was used by his mentor, Capability Brown, and he even coined the term landscape gardener. But first, here's today's curated news. Oh my goodness, am I so excited to share today's curated news with you because I made a friend in the native plant space. Her name is Haley, and she has a fabulous website called Native Backyards. And the post that I wanted to share with you today is one that she wrote, and it's called How to Find Native Plants Near Me. Now, this post is outstanding because Haley offers up some truly wonderful resources. First, she talks about getting a native plant book, and then she shows you how you can find books that are appropriate for your area. Second, she encourages all of us to check out the National Wildlife Federation Plant Finder. That is such an amazing resource, and she's put a link to it right here in this article. Third, Haley talks about exploring the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center database. Now, this is another wonderful database. I know that I recommended it on a previous episode. I think it was last year. But either way, this database is very special because it is the most comprehensive database of native plants in the United States. So this is a very special resource. Now, Haley points out a very nice feature of this particular website, which is that you can filter your search by all kinds of different parameters. You can look for plants based on the amount of sunlight they require. If you have a particularly boring spell in your garden and you want to find out what native plants you could grow that would offer you color during a time when you felt a little blah about your garden, that's excellent. And then you can also search for standard things like the size and shape of the plant. So anyway, this is a tremendous resource. So I'm glad to see that this made Haley's list. And then she also includes links to your local native plant society. These are wonderful organizations. I know most people have heard of various hort societies, but you might not be aware of the fact that there is probably a native plant society very near to you. So if you're curious about that, you can just jump onto this post and check that out. And then finally, Haley includes a link to something I think is fantastic, and that is plant nurseries that are in your area that focus on native plants. Now, I'm not a native purist. I do have non-native plants in my garden. However, my preference is, of course, for native plants. And so whenever possible, I base my plant decisions using nativeness as a factor. But it's not the only factor that I look at. Now, if you would like to read Haley's post for yourself, and I hope that you do, in addition to checking out her blog in general, all you need to do is search for the words native in the Facebook group for the show, and Haley's post will pop right up. And if you're not in the Facebook group, don't worry about it. It is so easy to join, and you always have a standing invitation, so you can join at any time. It's 100% free, and the group is a private group. All you need to do is the next time you're on Facebook, just head on up to the search bar and type in the words Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. It's time for today's botanical history. Here's today's botanical history for March 24th. Today is the baptism day of the little-known English naturalist, adventurer, explorer, and artist Mark Catesby, who was baptized on this day, March 24th, in 1682. And unfortunately, we have to go off of his baptism day because his exact birth date has been lost to time. Now, way back when the United States was a British colony, Mark made 2 trips to the New World. On his second trip, he traveled to the southeastern part of the country. He was around 30 years old and in the prime of his life, and he thoroughly explored and documented everything he saw in the New World. After returning to England, Mark published his masterpiece, the very first account of the flora and fauna of North America, and he did this in 2 large folios that were called The Natural History of Carolina, Florida, and the Bahama Islands. Published in French and English, Mark's magnificent book gave Europeans a glimpse at the magnificent biodiversity across the pond. Mark was unique in that he not only wrote the text for this book, but he also created the masterful illustrations and etchings, which are just unbelievable. Now, in these folios, Mark not only shared this amazing artwork, but he also talked about the climate, the soil, the water, and the crops that he'd encountered during his time in the States. And another thing that Mark did that was unusual is that he displayed birds and plants together, showing how they coexist in nature. Mark also painted living subjects. He didn't kill them like Audubon did before painting his subjects, and this meant that Mark's depictions were much more lifelike. Now, the way that Mark captured the plants is also fascinating. He drew both the fruit and the flower of the plant in a single image. And this is a good reminder to all gardeners who are going to take pictures of their garden this summer. Make sure to go out and capture your plants in all stages of their growth, like in the early spring when they're just beginning to pop out of the ground, and then when they set fruit, and then when the flower opens up. All of those stages are so important to capture because in the off season, we can often forget. Well, now that we've gone down that little rabbit hole, let's double back to Mark. Now, when you consider the fact that Mark was creating this incredible artwork and then pairing it with text in 2 different languages, that alone is impressive. But then when you layer in the fact that Mark was really drawing and writing with his audience in mind, that's when his genius really becomes apparent, because he never forgot that he was creating this incredible content for the people of Europe. Now, I always say that Mark's work reminds me of Maria Sibylla Merian in the sense that once you've seen his work, you never forget it. There's a recognizable quality to it. And another thing I wanted to share with you is that there's a fantastic video online that was put together by the University of South Carolina Libraries, and it's all about Mark Catesby, and it's called curious like Catesby. It's fantastic. Now, I put a link to that in today's show notes, so you can check it out there, or you can see it in the Facebook group for the show, because I also shared it there. Now, it's worth noting that the very first plant that Mark dedicated a full page to was the magnolia, and he also included a full page of text opposite of the beautiful artwork of this magnificent magnolia blossom. And if you have a magnolia growing in your garden, you are right now giving a thumbs up to Mark Catesby for devoting 2 pages just to this magnificent plant. Magnolias are heart-stopping. They're gorgeous, and it's fascinating to know that magnolias are one of the planet's earliest known flowering plants. In fact, they even existed before bees. Now, as gardeners, that's an important fact to know, because once you know that fact about magnolias, you can appreciate why the magnolia relies on beetles for pollination. They co-evolve together. Magnolia flowers do not produce nectar. Instead, they produce pollen, and that pollen is food for beetles. And in terms of uses, in Chinese medicine, the bark of the magnolia has been used to treat respiratory illness and anxiety. And today is the birthday of the American botanist who specialized in the Rocky Mountains, Aven Nelson, who was born on this day, March 24th, in 1859. In 1899, when Aven was 40 years old, he led a 14-week botanical expedition through Yellowstone. Aven had hired a student named Leslie Gooding to be the chore boy, and he paid him $10 per month. And this team of people that Aven had collected assembled at the University of Wyoming, where Nelson was a new teacher. Now, this student that Aven had selected, Leslie, actually wrote about the excitement on campus at the prospect of going on such an amazing trip. And he wrote this about it in his recollections. He wrote, "Some 3 or 4 months were to be spent in Yellowstone Park collecting plants. Many students were anxious to accompany Dr. Nelson on the expedition and were willing to work for nothing just to see the park. This was in the days when autos were much like hen's teeth, and trips through the park by stage were expensive." Now, what I love about that quote is the fact that Leslie uses the saying hen's teeth, which refers to something being exceptionally rare since hens have no teeth. And so saying this about automobiles is saying that they were so scarce, they were virtually non-existent. This was 1899 after all. Now, in addition to Leslie, another botany student named Elias Nelson, no relation to Aven, joined the group. When they reached Yellowstone, Leslie and Elias went collecting near an area called Artist Paint Pots. It's a dangerous area with over 50 springs, geysers, vents, and mud pots. Now, geothermal features are some of the deadliest natural hazards in Yellowstone, but sadly, people often fail to realize that fact. To this day, park rangers rescue 1 or 2 visitors who fall from the boardwalks or wander off designated paths and punch their feet through the thin earthen crust into boiling water. And this is what happened to Elias. He was drawn by curiosity, and he ignored the warning signs that existed way back even in 1899, and he went off the path. Suddenly, he found himself with one leg sunk into boiling mud. He managed somehow to free himself, and Aven's wife did what she could with soda and flour to bandage his wounds. The doc at the nearest town recommended that Elias return home for treatment. Now, despite all of the challenges that were posed by Yellowstone, Aven Nelson and his team collected roughly 30,000 specimens, although only about 500 species were represented. It turns out that Aven had purposefully gathered 20 to 30 duplicates per species because he correctly assumed that institutions and collectors would want specimens from Yellowstone. Today, Aven is remembered as the father of Wyoming botany, but his greatest legacy is the Rocky Mountain Herbarium, created from Aven's collection of Yellowstone plants. It's time for Unearthed Words. Today's Unearthed Words come from the conservationist and naturalist Charles Joseph Sariel, and I just received one of his fantastic books in the mail. It's an account of his time spent as a conservationist. I was so excited to get it, and it really is fabulous. I don't think you can go wrong with any of Charles's books, so if you're interested in that, do go and check it out. But today's unearthed words are from Charles. They're from his diary, and this was a little excerpt from an entry that he wrote on this day, March 24th, in 1938. Charles wrote, "I am increasing my knowledge of the subject," and by the subject, he means botany, especially the seeding of wildflowers. Even yesterday, I read that bloodroot was in danger of extermination through indiscriminate pulling up of the roots for medicinal purposes. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Gardens in the Spirit of Place by Paige Dickey. This book came out in 2005. It's one of my favorites because of the author, Paige, who is fantastic. And if you remember, already this year, I've recommended 2 books by Paige, and her most recent one is the book Uprooted, which is all about Paige settling into her new space, her new garden. So if you're in the process of transitioning from one garden to the next, make sure you check out that book. But this book is obviously an earlier book that Paige wrote, and it's all about gardens that are really defined by their place in this world. So think about environments and how environments really dictate what happens in a garden. Now, what's really cool about this particular book is that we get to tour 14 incredible gardens that are in the United States, and we get to have Paige come along as our tour guide. So whether you're talking about a garden on Mount Desert Island, Maine, or a Wisconsin garden, or a garden in California, you get to see all kinds of gardens and all kinds of garden ideas. And of course, the emphasis here is how the garden relates to and is defined by its location, its environment, its surroundings. This is a fantastic topic. I love it. And the other thing that's fantastic about this book is the photography, because it's absolutely outstanding, as per usual for any of Paige's books. This book is 192 pages of incredible garden spaces that are defined by their place on this planet. You can get a copy of Gardens in the Spirit of Place by Paige Dickey and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $8. And that's an incredible deal for a used copy because new copies go for around $50. So that's over 5 times the price of some of these used copies. So if you're interested in getting one of those, act quickly because I know they'll be gone if you wait too long. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is the anniversary of the death of the innovative and all-time great landscape gardener Humphrey Repton, who died on this day, March 24th in 1818. And by the way, it's Humphrey with no E, so no E in Humphrey Repton. Humphrey was trained and molded by the great garden designer Capability Brown. Yet as he matured, Humphrey broke out from under his mentor's shadow and led a transformation of English gardens that was very much a departure from Capability Brown's formal gardens. Humphrey wanted landscapes that brought out, quote, the natural beauty and hid, quote, the natural defects of every situation. Humphrey designed over 400 gardens, and his picturesque landscapes are known for their gently rolling vistas, attractive clumps of trees, terraces, and homes nestled amongst shrubs and foliage. Now, here's the part that I think modern garden designers or landscapers will get a kick out of. Like many successful modern landscape designers, Humphrey was a natural marketer of his work. He created these red leather portfolios by hand for his clients, and his illustrations were pastoral and compelling. By using his red books, as he called them, to showcase his design ideas, Humphrey's clients would see his delightful watercolors depicting the current state of their property, and then they would lift a little flap and see what their property would look like after Humphrey improved it. So it was kind of like a little pop-up book, but only for landscape design. Now, today, we regard Humphrey's before and after red books as impressive works of art. And fortunately, the world has been blessed that Humphrey's red books have been preserved in both public and private collections. The gardeners who are lucky enough to see them, even today, are impressed with Humphrey's innovative and ingenious use of the little page flaps that showed the before and after effects of his planned design changes. Now, in addition to the red books, Humphrey coined the term landscape gardener, and he even had that job title carved into his business cards, which were made from the bark of a pine tree. Wow, how clever. Now, after Humphrey died on this day in 1818, his remains were placed in a rose garden. That was his request. He had personally chosen his resting place, and he also wrote his epitaph, and I thought it would be a wonderful way to close the show today. Not like the Egyptian tyrants consecrate, unmixed with others shall my dust remain, but moldering, blended, melting into earth. Mine shall give form and color to the rose, and while its vivid blossoms cheer mankind, its perfumed odor shall ascend to heaven. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. Hey, thanks for spending part of your day with the Daily Gardener. If you want to read even more botanical brevities, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. That's where you can find all the stories, biographies, and books that I share on the show. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. It has lots of goodies in it, and I try to make the newsletter like you're getting a marvelous letter from a garden friend. You can always find the Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Twitter, and you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can easily share your gardener greetings or book submissions by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove and Wyoming, Minnesota, with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, and Eric Begay. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.